What is going on at UNLV is absolutely wild, and not even the part about conference realignment and deciding and recognizing and realizing that they are the swing vote to potentially kill the Mountain West, potentially save the Pac-12. UNLV is, like we all imagined, the center of the college football world. But today, that story got crazy. Their starting quarterback, if you haven't seen, their starting quarterback, Matthew Sluka, says, I'm out. I'm done. I was promised $100,000 in NIL money. I've gotten $3,000 as money to move from Massachusetts to Las Vegas. And I haven't got my money, and they tell me they're not going to give me my money, so I quit. I'm going to redshirt and play college football somewhere else next year, which is a wild story because there are immediate reactions, immediate impacts, there are problems on the field, off the field, rumors running rampant that another program told him, like, hey, drop out right now while you can. We'll pay you X amount of dollars, and you can play for us next year. There are all those things happening. But essentially what has happened is Matthew Sluka has said, I was promised $100,000 to transfer to UNLV. I got $3,000. They put together a package once I started to complain about, like, hey, when am I going to get my money? That they were going to give me $12,000 in NIL money when I was promised $100,000. So that's a problem. I'm out of here. And there's been now this back and forth of Matthew Sluka's people saying, we didn't ask for more money. We asked for what we were promised. And UNLV has come out with a statement that says football player Matthew Sluka's representative made financial demands upon the university and its NIL collective in order to continue playing. UNLV Athletics interpreted these demands as a violation of the NCAA pay-for-play rules, as well as Nevada state law. UNLV does not engage in such activities, nor does it respond to implied threats. UNLV has honored all previously agreed-upon scholarships for Matthew Sluka. UNLV has conducted its due diligence and will continue to operate its programs within the framework of NCAA rules and regulations, as well as Nevada state laws. Its NIL collective came out and said, we have gave Matthew Sluka everything that we formally agreed upon. And the word formal is doing some heavy lifting in that statement, right? Because when the argument is, you told me you would give me X, you have now given me Y, you need to give me Z to make up for the difference. Essentially, they are saying, what we told you was, and this is not uncommon in college football, because if it is verbal instead of a written contract, there is some ambiguity. There's plausible deniability on both sides. Nobody can be taken advantage. Well, that's not true. Nobody can take advantage of, because one side obviously feels they've been taken advantage of. Nobody can be, reprimanded by the NCAA or by their state or by the university or whatever if there's nothing in writing. So this is not, as shocking as it might be to the average person, this is not out of the ordinary for there to be a verbal agreement that you say, hey, I'm promised this. Where's my money? And I don't necessarily have an issue with if you told me, hey, we are going to pay you X amount of dollars, and the only reason you went to that school was to get X amount of dollars. Like, Matthew Sluka is a graduate student. The reason he's not, I'm sure in his mind, in an NFL training camp is because UNLV promised him $100,000. So where's my money? I'm a professional player. And I understand the idea that this is a turnoff to a bunch of people, that the transactional nature of college football sucks. I understand that. I don't necessarily want to get too deep in the weeds here, but it is crazy to me, the idea that, like, everybody loves capitalism until it comes to sports. And then it's like, well, wait a second, that's not fair. But this is like capitalism at its best, right? Like, it's a job for Matthew Sluka. The whole reason he's at UNLV is to make money. It's not to get an education. It's not to, it's just, I'm a mercenary. Somebody paid me the highest figure possible for me to come to their school and play football. And he feels like he held up his end of the bargain. He showed up, he performed. They're 3-0. There are people talking about UNLV being a college football playoff contender because of his performance. And he says, well, I'm going to yank that out from under you. Does it suck that he is now quitting on his teammates, quitting on the school, etc.? Yes, but this is not like this is part of the downside, I think, of dealing with and recognizing where college football is now out in the open. It's always kind of been this way. It's always been transactional in nature. It's always been, what can the players provide the coaches? And now that that's flipped on its head a little bit, where it's not so much what can the players provide the coaches as much as what can the university provide the players, what can the NIL collectives provide the players, what can the football program provide the players, what can the coaches provide the players. People are having a hard time rectifying with that, and I understand that. But ultimately, it's this guy's job. And if you say, hey, you guys told me you were going to pay me X, I expect X. And then the story took another turn where his teammates are essentially saying on social media, like, thank God, goodbye, we will see you. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. And that brings this whole nother dynamic of, okay, one side says one thing, one side says the other. It's a classic he said, they said, I guess. And so when it all first comes out, it's like, oh, okay, well, who am I more inclined to believe? Because both sides, and this I think should happen more in society, is you should have that thought process. Like, who has more incentive to lie? Well, both sides have incentive to lie. UNLV has an incentive to lie because it looks really bad to potential recruits if one of your guys says, I was promised $100,000. They gave me $3,000. So don't come to UNLV. At the same time, this quarterback doesn't want to look like he's coming off as a money grab. So he doesn't want to come out and say, well, yeah, I asked for more NIL money during the middle of the season. Have you seen how good I'm playing? Because that looks really bad. It makes you look really bad. And it's already like your NFL career is basically torpedoed because you are prioritizing dollars instead of your teammates and all of that stuff that NFL scouts and GMs and director of player personnel and all those people love to harp on, even though if Matthew Sluka was going to be a first-round pick, they would look past him, beating his wife or whatever, as long as he played football good. But that's neither here nor there. He has to make his money in college now because that is ultimately where his football career probably ends. And so when you have a finite window that you only have time to make money, I don't blame him for trying to make as much money. But he has just as much reason to lie as UNLV does. So then you get that added layer of the players are basically like, thank you, Lord, he's gone. That they feel like they're going to be better at the position on social media. Like their best wide receiver is saying, like, I'm going to now have 150 yards receiving on Saturday. This is great. That is a wild spot to be in. But then another layer comes in where a running back, their fourth leading rusher on the season, who has 100 yards, I think, through 3 games, says he's out too. He's entering the transfer portal, taking his redshirt year because his NIL deals were not met. So who the hell do you believe now? Because his teams aren't coming out and being like, oh, well, thank God Michael Allen's gone. So was he actually promised something that he didn't get delivered? There are so many layers to this story. And I think there's going to be, what it's going to boil down to is the shady, seedy underbelly of college sports that we're all going to have to deal with. It's going to lead to more calls from the NCAA to say, like, hey, you guys got to figure it out. And then the NCAA says, like, you guys don't want us to figure anything out because every idea we put together, you guys bitch and moan and complain about. So it's what ultimately is highlighted by this situation is that it truly is the Wild West in terms of NIL right now, because nobody knows what the rules are and everybody is afraid of the idea of what I mentioned earlier of like, this is capitalism, baby. It is whoever's going to pay however much I think I'm owed. Whoever's going to pay that, I'm going to the highest bidder. And nobody wants to be viewed as the entity or the organization that's trying to stifle that. Well, I don't think the NCAA is going to do anything about it. I don't think the federal government's going to do anything about it. So there's just this interesting dynamic of like, everybody knows that it is shady and seedy and unethical, antithesis of how college sports operate 2020. And yet nobody is really equipped to do anything about it. And that whole entire situation is like, great, I now have internet problem. So the whole thing is ridiculous. Everybody knows it, but nobody's going to like take the steps to fix it and deal with it. And I think you're going to see more of this is when it started with, like players started opting out of bowl games. And the idea was like, oh my, these kids don't love football. It's ridiculous. This is what is ruining college sports. And then just keep taking kind of steps down that path of like, oh, well, that kind of sucks. Well, that kind of sucks. Well, that kind of sucks. To now it's like college kids are getting promised one thing, feel like they've been screwed out of that money. And instead of quietly going about their day, they recognize, and I think you should recognize, that it is a business masquerading as a sport. It's always been a business. It's just taken the power brokers of the sport a long time to recognize that it is a business. But it's a business, and it's now on display. And does that part suck? Yeah. And does it stink that could potentially lead to UNLV maybe not making the college football playoff when people thought that maybe they were good enough? Yeah. There's a whole lot that stinks about it. But I don't know where we go from here, and I don't know how we fix it, because I don't think anybody's got the stones to put out any ideas on how to fix it without pissing the wrong people off. And that's not a very good spot to find yourself. But it's where we are. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you are watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out. If you listen on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. Goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.